Plato's account of Atlantis has haunted human imagination for more than 2,000 years. He did not introduce it as a fantasy tale or a bedtime story, but as part of a serious philosophical dialogue, woven into his works Timaeus and Critias. In his telling, Atlantis was not merely a city but an entire island civilization, a powerful maritime empire that flourished some 9,000 years before his time. The Atlanteans, according to Plato, possessed advanced knowledge, immense wealth, and control over vast territories that stretched even beyond the Pillars of Heracleion, what we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. The tale ends in catastrophe, with the island swallowed by the sea, in a single day and night of misfortune. From the moment those words were written, the story of Atlantis became both a beacon of hope and a source of controversy. Was Plato recounting distant memory, or was he crafting an allegory to serve his philosophy about ideal states and the dangers of hubris? The ambiguity of his account created fertile ground for speculation. For centuries scholars, travelers, and dreamers debated whether Atlantis was real or metaphorical. Some insisted that Plato invented the story as a warning about corruption and decadence. Others suggested that he might have been preserving fragments of genuine historical memory, passed down through Egyptian priests or oral traditions far older than Greece itself. The fascination endures precisely because the boundaries between myth and reality are blurred. If Atlantis was only fiction, why does the story align so closely with catastrophic geological events that we know did happen in prehistory? If it was allegory, why cloak it in such rich detail about geography, culture, and the rise and fall of a civilization? The competing theories about Atlantis are as varied as the coastlines of the world. One of the most enduring is the connection to the island of Santorini, known in ancient times as Thera. Around 1600 BCE, a colossal volcanic eruption tore apart the island, leaving behind the crescent-shaped caldera visible today. Archaeological excavations at Akrotiri revealed an advanced Bronze Age settlement with multi-story houses, elaborate frescoes, and sophisticated plumbing. To many, it seemed too similar to Plato's description to dismiss entirely. The eruption of Thera created tsunamis and ash clouds that devastated surrounding regions, an echo of the sudden destruction he described. Yet critics counter that the timeline does not match Plato's claim of a civilization 9,000 years earlier, and that Santorini was remarkable but not the world-spanning empire he envisioned. Others have looked westward, suggesting that Atlantis might lie near the Azores Islands in the Atlantic Ocean. Rising dramatically from the deep, these volcanic peaks are tantalizing candidates for remnants of a larger landmass. Early maps and medieval sailors often marked mysterious islands in that region, fueling the legend. Modern enthusiasts point to underwater structures, terraces, and anomalies on sonar scans as possible traces of lost cities. While mainstream geologists argue these formations are natural, the persistence of the theory shows how powerfully Atlantis grips the collective imagination, always lingering just beyond accepted boundaries of science. The Caribbean has also entered the debate, with claims that ruins off the coast of Cuba resemble megalithic blocks and city-like grids. Explorers in the early 2000s announced sonar findings at depths that seemed impossible for human construction unless the site dated back to a time when sea levels were drastically lower. The possibility of an advanced civilization predating known history was electrifying, but soon after, reports dwindled, funding dried up, and mainstream archaeology distanced itself from the claims. To believers, this was yet another case of forbidden history, discoveries that might upend conventional timelines being quietly shelved or ignored. At the heart of the Atlantis debate lies the tension between academic caution and popular wonder. Professional historians often reject the search for Atlantis outright, branding it pseudo-archaeology. They argue that chasing myths distracts from real research and fuels unfounded conspiracies. Yet that dismissal itself fuels suspicion. Why the eagerness to bury the story? Why ridicule explorers and researchers who pursue possibilities outside the conventional timeline? For those who see themselves as seekers of hidden truths, the resistance of academia is evidence that there may be something dangerous or disruptive in acknowledging the existence of lost civilizations. This is where the idea of forbidden history begins to take root. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, countless explorers, from Ignatius Donnelly to Charles Hapgood, advanced bold theories connecting Atlantis to real-world geological changes. Donnelly's book Atlantis, The Antediluvian World popularized the idea that all ancient civilizations descended from this one lost mother culture. Hapgood later argued that shifting crusts of the Earth could have swallowed entire continents. Though criticized by the scientific community, their works inspired generations of readers, researchers, and even political leaders. The line between fantasy and suppressed possibility blurred further, and Atlantis became less about one specific site and more about the notion that human history is far older and more complex than textbooks allow. The forbidden aura around Atlantis is not only about where it might be located, but also about what it represents. If Plato's story holds even a kernel of truth, it implies that advanced civilizations existed long before the traditionally accepted dawn of human history. That idea disrupts the linear progression of primitive to advanced that underpins much of modern archaeology. It suggests a cycle, civilizations rising, achieving greatness, and then being erased by nature's fury, only to be remembered as legend. The academic world resists such notions because they challenge established timelines and force uncomfortable questions about what else might be buried beneath seas and sands. The Atlantis story continues to evolve with each new discovery of a submerged city around the world. When divers reveal streets and temples under Greek waters, when sonar detects walls beneath India's coastline, or when Roman villas emerge from the sea near Naples, people cannot help but wonder, are these fragments of Atlantis, or are they reminders that Plato's tale was never singular but a symbol of a recurring human tragedy? The pattern is undeniable: advanced settlements drowned by rising waters, earthquakes, and eruptions, their stories fading into myth until rediscovered centuries later. Atlantis, then, may not be a single place, but a metaphor for all the forgotten cities the sea has claimed. The enduring power of Atlantis lies in its dual nature, both allegory and mystery, both lesson and lure. For skeptics, it remains a parable about pride and downfall. For seekers, it is an unsolved puzzle hinting at vast chapters of human history erased from the record. Whether Atlantis was real or not matters less than the cultural weight it carries. It opened the door to believing that the ocean conceals entire lost worlds. And in that sense, Plato's words did not describe the past alone, they set in motion centuries of exploration, controversy, and obsession with the possibility that beneath the waves lie civilizations that could rewrite what we know about ourselves. Atlantis is less about one island sinking into the sea, and more about the timeless human fear and fascination that the water hides secrets we are not meant to uncover. Beneath the blue-green waters off the coast of southern Greece lies a city older than legend, a place that challenges our understanding of when urban life truly began. This is Pavlopetri, considered the world's oldest submerged city, dating back more than 5,000 years. To divers and archaeologists, descending into its remains is like stepping through a portal into the Bronze Age, a frozen snapshot of an ancient world now silenced by the sea. Streets still run straight and narrow, walls trace the outlines of houses, and the faint footprints of public spaces whisper of a society far more advanced than once believed possible for its time. Unlike Atlantis, Pavlopetri is no myth, it is real, tangible, and mapped stone by stone under the water's surface. The discovery of Pavlopetri was almost accidental. In 1967, a team of archaeologists spotted curious stone formations beneath shallow waters near Laconia in southern Greece. What seemed at first like scattered ruins revealed itself to be a carefully planned city grid. Streets intersected at right angles, buildings had multiple rooms, and evidence of a central square or plaza suggested communal gatherings. In 2009, new technology allowed researchers to create 3D digital maps of the site, confirming the remarkable scope of the city. What they found stunned the academic world. Pavlopetri was at least 1,500 years older than Plato's Atlantis. The sea had preserved not just ruins but the very essence of organized urban life at the dawn of civilization. Exploring Pavlopetri means uncovering the daily rhythms of a people long forgotten. Divers recovered storage jars known as pit hoi, used for holding olive oil, wine, and grains. The placement of these jars and the structures around them indicate that Pavlopetri was a hub of trade. Its position on the Mediterranean made it a perfect crossroads for commerce, linking the early Mycenaean world with Crete, the Cyclades, and beyond. The city's proximity to natural harbors shows it was not isolated but part of a larger economic web that stretched across the Bronze Age seas. In the labyrinth of narrow streets, archaeologists could almost imagine children running between houses, merchants haggling over goods, and families gathering in courtyards lit by oil lamps. It was not just ruins, it was life, interrupted and then buried by waves. The tragedy of Pavlopetri lies in its disappearance. Earthquakes shook the region repeatedly, causing sections of land to sink. Sea levels gradually rose, sealing the city's fate. Unlike mythical Atlantis, swallowed in a single catastrophic day, Pavlopetri died more slowly, drowned piece by piece until it slipped beneath the water for good. By the time it was fully submerged, its people had long since moved inland or perished in the upheavals. The sea became both their destroyer and their guardian, protecting their streets from erosion and looting for millennia until modern divers rediscovered them. What makes Pavlopetri so astonishing is not only its age but its sophistication. Until its discovery, archaeologists assumed that such complex urban planning did not exist in Europe until centuries later. Pavlopetri proved otherwise. Its layout demonstrated intentional design, not just random clusters of houses but a community built with foresight, suggesting social organization, leadership, and shared vision. This single site rewrote the timeline of early European civilization, forcing scholars to admit that humans were experimenting with advanced settlement structures far earlier than textbooks allowed. It also raised haunting questions. If Pavlopetri was real, how many other such cities lie hidden beneath shallow bays and continental shelves around the world, invisible until technology reveals them? And yet, despite its importance, Pavlopetri remains strangely absent from popular history. Tourists flock to the ruins of Athens, Crete, and Rome, but Pavlopetri lies quietly underwater, known mostly to divers and specialists. Some believe this neglect is part of the broader tendency to dismiss submerged civilizations as anomalies rather than evidence of a larger pattern. For those intrigued by forbidden history, Pavlopetri is proof that the sea has already erased more of our past than we are prepared to acknowledge. Every discovery like this raises the uncomfortable possibility that what we call the cradle of civilization may have many more cradles, some long since drowned. To stand above Pavlopetri's waters and gaze down is to feel the thin veil separating our world from theirs. Beneath the rippling surface, outlines of houses and streets shimmer like ghosts. Fishermen who pass overhead are often unaware that beneath their boats lies a city older than Homer's epics, older than the myths of Atlantis. It is a reminder that civilizations are fragile, and that nature can erase even the most enduring human accomplishments. The people of Pavlopetri once believed they were building for eternity, laying down walls that would house generations. Today, fish weave through those walls, and the tides wash endlessly over what remains. The significance of Pavlopetri is not only archaeological but symbolic. It bridges the gap between myth and reality. For centuries, the idea of sunken cities belonged to legend: Atlantis, Lyoness, Ys, tales of drowned worlds that seemed too fantastic to be true. Pavlopetri demonstrates that entire urban landscapes can and do lie beneath the sea. It takes the forbidden history of lost cities out of the realm of imagination and anchors it in stone foundations still visible to the human eye. When viewers see images of divers swimming down streets built 5,000 years ago, the myth of Atlantis no longer seems impossible. It seems inevitable that other cities must still be out there, waiting. In the end, Pavlopetri does not need embellishment. It does not require mythical kings, advanced technologies, or cataclysmic fire from the gods. Its very existence is more powerful than legend. It shows that humanity has always lived on the edge of the sea, drawn to its riches and doomed by its unpredictability. It tells us that the ocean is not merely a boundary but a force that reshapes human destiny. To lose Pavlopetri was to lose a chapter of our shared story, but in rediscovering it, we glimpse the hidden continuity between past and present. The drowned stones speak without words, civilizations rise, civilizations fall, and the sea remembers everything. On the western shores of India, where the waves of the Arabian Sea crash endlessly against the coast of Gujarat, there lies a story that blurs the line between mythology and archaeology. It is the story of Dwarka, the legendary city of Lord Krishna, said to have been built of shining gold and silver, jeweled walls, and towering palaces that dazzled the ancient world. For centuries, Dwarka lived in the realm of sacred texts, celebrated in the Mahabharata and the Puranas as one of the 7 most holy cities of Hinduism. According to legend, Krishna, revered as a divine ruler and strategist, built the city after leaving Mathura, fashioning it as a fortress against his enemies and a paradise for his followers. Dwarka was said to be so magnificent that even the gods envied it. Yet, like Atlantis, its story ends with a cataclysm, swallowed by the sea after Krishna's death, condemned to vanish beneath the waves as penance for human corruption. For millennia, many dismissed it as myth, a metaphor for divine power and moral downfall. But then, divers began to uncover something extraordinary beneath the waters off India's coast. In 1983, marine archaeologists from the National Institute of Oceanography launched explorations in the Gulf of Khumbat and near modern Dwarka. What they found sent shockwaves through both academic and religious circles. Beneath the waves lay a series of structures, walls, and artifacts that seemed to mirror the descriptions from ancient texts. Stone blocks lined up in precise formations, anchors from ships rested on the seabed, and pottery fragments emerged from the sand. Some of the anchors were massive, suggesting they once moored large seafaring vessels. To believers, this was proof. The Dwarka of Krishna's legend was not only real but had thrived as a bustling port before being drowned by the ocean. The cities remained stretched over wide areas, with indications of harbors, fortifications, and temple structures. The find suggested advanced maritime activity, not surprising given India's long tradition of seafaring, but stunning when connected to a city once considered purely mythical. One of the most compelling discoveries was a submerged wall running nearly half a kilometer, constructed with massive blocks of stone. It bore the hallmarks of intentional human design, not random geology. Coupled with artifacts like terracotta pieces and beads, the evidence painted a picture of a once-thriving urban hub engaged in trade and religion, eerily consistent with descriptions preserved in scripture. Yet, as with all tales of forbidden history, the discoveries were not without controversy. Mainstream archaeologists questioned the dating of the ruins, pointing out that sediment samples and artifacts suggested periods ranging from 3,500 to even 9,000 years ago, a timeline that, if accurate, would predate known Indian civilizations and challenge established chronology. Critics argued that the supposed ruins might be natural formations, misinterpreted by eager researchers influenced by mythology. Supporters countered that the sheer scale and pattern of the finds were too deliberate to be accidental. Once again, the clash between myth, science, and belief left the truth unresolved. For many in India, Dwarka is more than an archaeological site, it is a living symbol of cultural identity and spiritual heritage. Pilgrims still visit modern Dwarka, where temples rise in devotion to Krishna, believing they walk the same ground as the ancient city. The idea that the sea itself guards the remnants of Krishna's golden metropolis lends an almost sacred aura to the waters. Divers who descend into the murky depths describe a sense of awe, as though entering a sacred vault preserved by time. To them, the city is not lost, it simply waits, resting beneath the ocean as testimony to faith and history intertwined. What makes Dwarka especially powerful in the context of forbidden history is the way it bridges the divide between scripture and archaeology. For centuries, scholars in the West dismissed Indian epics as mythology, placing them alongside Greek myths of Olympus or Norse tales of Valhalla. But if even part of Dwarka's legend is rooted in reality, it suggests that ancient texts may carry historical memory disguised as sacred narrative. This possibility unsettles academic orthodoxy, which prefers to separate religion from history. To acknowledge Dwarka as real is to admit that ancient traditions may encode truths overlooked by modern frameworks, a recognition that opens the door to reinterpreting countless myths worldwide. At the same time, Dwarka raises uncomfortable questions about the fragility of human achievement. If such a vibrant city truly did exist, how did it vanish so completely? Ancient texts describe its submergence as punishment, but geology offers more natural explanations: gradual sea level rise, tectonic shifts, or catastrophic floods. The Indian coastline has long been shaped by the forces of the sea, with evidence of shifting shores and drowned settlements throughout the region. Dwarka may be only the most famous of many cities swallowed in silence, each carrying its own story of families displaced, temples lost, and memories erased. The debate over Dwarka also reveals the politics of history. Some accuse nationalistic agendas of exaggerating discoveries to bolster pride in India's antiquity, while others accuse Western academia of downplaying non-European civilizations to maintain established narratives. In this struggle, truth becomes elusive, caught between faith, pride, and skepticism. And yet, the stones remain, silent and unyielding beneath the waves, indifferent to human arguments. They stand as mute witnesses to a time when Dwarka was alive, whether as the city of Krishna or as a thriving port whose legend inspired sacred texts. To imagine Dwarka in its prime is to picture a dazzling seaport, filled with merchants unloading exotic goods, priests performing rituals in grand temples, and families walking through streets lined with markets and homes. Ships would have sailed in and out, carrying spices, beads, and sacred offerings across the seas. The city would have glowed with lamps at night, its palaces reflecting in the waves, a jewel of civilization on the edge of the ocean. And then, slowly or suddenly, it was gone, submerged beneath waters that today conceal its brilliance but not its memory. The people who once thrived there are lost to history, but their city remains, tantalizingly close, like a whisper we strain to hear through the roar of the sea. Dwarka's story, whether myth, history, or both, reminds us of the fragility of human ambition and the enduring power of the ocean. It compels us to reconsider how much of our past lies hidden beneath the waves, waiting for discovery. Just as Pavla Petri shows us a real Atlantis, Dwarka warns us that legends are not always fabrications. They may be echoes of civilizations that once walked the earth, proud and thriving, until the sea claimed them. And in that recognition lies the true forbidden history, not that such cities exist, but that we have ignored them for so long, preferring myth to reality and skepticism to wonder. Off the coast of Okinawa, Japan, in the warm waters of the East China Sea, lies a place that has baffled divers, geologists, and historians for decades. Known as the Yonaguni Monument, it is a vast underwater structure that some insist is evidence of a lost civilization, while others dismiss it as nothing more than a geological quirk. To descend upon it is to enter a world of jagged terraces, sharp-edged steps, and massive flat platforms that look almost too precise to be natural. The ocean currents sweep across what appears like a sunken pyramid, and the silence of the deep makes it easy to believe that this was once a place of worship, a fortress, or even the remains of a city erased by rising seas. But the mystery of Yonaguni is not simply about the stones beneath the waves, it is about the clash between science and possibility, between skepticism and wonder. The discovery came in 1986, when a local diver, searching for new sites to explore, stumbled upon the strange formations. At first, he thought he was looking at the ruins of a castle or an ancient step temple, its terraces dropping down into the depths like some drowned ziggurat. Word spread quickly, and soon researchers and adventurers were flocking to the site. What they found were immense stone formations, covering an area more than 150 meters long and 40 meters wide, with sheer walls, flat surfaces, and what looked like stairs cut into the bedrock. The site even included features that resembled roads, platforms, and a massive stage-like area that could have been used for gatherings or ceremonies. To the untrained eye, the impression was undeniable: this was no accident of nature, but the deliberate work of human hands. Those who champion the idea of Yonaguni as a man-made monument argue passionately that the evidence points toward human craftsmanship. The sharp angles, the geometric precision, and the presence of structures resembling gateways and pillars suggest intentional design. Some point to what appears to be carvings of animals or symbols etched into the stone, adding an air of ancient artistry to the site. Theories abound. Perhaps it was part of a lost Japanese civilization, or even remnants of a culture from the last ice age, when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower and vast stretches of land connected Japan to mainland Asia. If true, Yonaguni could date back 10,000 years or more, rewriting the history of human settlement in the region and placing advanced construction at a time when mainstream archaeology insists humans were still living in small, simple communities. But geology has its own explanation. Many scientists argue that Yonaguni is simply the result of natural tectonic forces. The island lies in a seismically active region where earthquakes constantly fracture and shift the bedrock. Sandstone, the material that makes up much of the structure, tends to break along straight lines, producing sharp edges and geometric patterns. What looks like stairs could be the natural result of erosion, and what seem like platforms may simply be flat layers of stone revealed by shifting earth and relentless waves. To these scientists, the site is not evidence of lost civilizations but of the Earth's restless movements, carving shapes that trick the human mind into seeing design where there is none. The debate has raged for decades, and at its heart lies the larger struggle over how we interpret anomalies. Skeptics accuse believers of indulging in pseudoscience, seeing what they want to see in random formations. Believers accuse skeptics of dismissing evidence too quickly, clinging to established timelines and refusing to consider possibilities that challenge them. To divers who have seen Yonaguni firsthand, the experience is often transformative. Swimming along those vast terraces, feeling the scale of the structures, and watching the sunlight filter down in shafts across what looks like colossal steps, it is hard not to believe you are drifting through the ruins of a forgotten city. The human mind is drawn to order, to patterns, to meaning, and Yonaguni offers all three in abundance. What adds to the allure of Yonaguni is the possibility that, if it is artificial, it represents a civilization we know nothing about. Japan's earliest known culture, the Jaman, dates back thousands of years, but even they are not believed to have built such monumental structures. If Yonaguni is man-made and as old as some claim, it would mean advanced societies existed in East Asia at a time when humans elsewhere were only beginning to farm or settle in villages. It would also suggest that rising seas after the last ice age drowned vast tracts of human achievement, erasing entire cultures from memory. That prospect is both thrilling and unsettling, thrilling because it expands the scope of human history, unsettling because it reminds us how fragile and temporary civilizations truly are. For local people in Okinawa, Yonaguni is more than a scientific curiosity. It has become part of cultural identity, a source of pride and mystery. Tourists flock to dive among the ruins, and guides tell stories of ancient kings, sea gods, and forgotten temples. Some researchers even connect the site to Japanese myths of Ryugu, the palace of the dragon god beneath the sea. These stories, dismissed by skeptics as folklore, now feel eerily resonant when set against the backdrop of massive stone terraces rising from the deep. The blending of myth, history, and science makes Yonaguni a living example of how the sea holds both memory and imagination. The unresolved nature of the monument only deepens its power. If proven natural, it is still one of the most remarkable geological formations on Earth, an underwater labyrinth that invites wonder. If proven artificial, it would revolutionize our understanding of prehistory, forcing scholars to acknowledge a civilization capable of engineering on a scale that should not have existed at the time. Either way, Yonaguni stands as a reminder that not all questions have neat answers, and not all mysteries yield easily to scientific explanation. Sometimes the ocean keeps its secrets, leaving us suspended between belief and doubt, between myth and reality. To dive at Yonaguni is to confront this tension head-on. The currents pull at you, the stone looms around you, and as you glide across the terraces you feel the weight of time pressing down. Was this once a stage where rituals were performed before thousands? Was it a fortress guarding an ancient coastline? Or is it nothing more than the artistry of the earth itself, playing tricks on our imagination? Whatever the truth, Yonaguni is a monument, if not to ancient builders, then to the human thirst for mystery. Beneath the waves, in that twilight world where light fades into shadow, it reminds us that the boundary between the natural and the man-made is not always as clear as we believe, and that the ocean is still filled with enigmas waiting to be unraveled. For centuries, sailors told stories of Egyptian cities swallowed by the sea, whispered legends of Heracleion and Canopus, gateways to the Nile Delta that had once thrived with temples and trade before vanishing beneath the waves. These names echoed in ancient texts, referenced by Herodotus, Strabo, and other classical writers, but for millennia they seemed like ghosts of memory. Many assumed they were mythical, exaggerations of real ports that had faded away in the shifting sands of history. Yet in the year 2000, a French underwater archaeologist named Frank Gaudio and his team uncovered the truth. Off the coast of Alexandria, buried in silt and sand just 6 meters below the surface, they found an entire city preserved beneath the sea, its colossal statues toppled yet intact, its temples lying in silence, its streets and artifacts telling a story lost for over 1,000 years. The lost world of Heracleion and nearby Canopus had been rediscovered, and suddenly myths transformed into vivid archaeological reality. The discovery was breathtaking in scale. Divers emerged with images of massive red granite statues, some standing more than 5 meters tall, still lying where they had fallen when the city collapsed into the sea. Temples once dedicated to the gods, including Ammonius Jerub and Osiris, appeared out of the murky water, with columns, altars, and offering tables scattered across the seabed. Even entire ships were found, preserved in the thick mud of the delta, anchors still attached, cargo lying dormant for over a millennium. Gold coins, inscribed steels, jewelry, and pottery all revealed that Heracleion was not a minor outpost but a thriving hub of trade and religion, a place where Egypt met the Mediterranean world. To explore it was to step back into the days when pharaohs ruled and foreign merchants crowded the harbors of the Nile. Heracleion was once the great port of entry to Egypt before Alexandria rose to dominance. Ships from Greece, Phoenicia, and beyond would dock here, their cargo inspected and taxed, their crews offering sacrifices at temples before journeying upriver. It was a city of wealth and devotion, where traders mingled with priests, and colossal statues guarded the sanctuaries. Canopus, located nearby, was equally renowned, not just for commerce but also for its temples dedicated to Osiris and the lavish festivals held in his honor. Together, the two cities embodied the prosperity and cultural fusion of late pharaonic Egypt, standing as symbols of Egypt's openness to the wider world. And then, without warning, they vanished, leaving only stories and fragments until their rediscovery. The cause of their destruction is as fascinating as their life. The Nile Delta rests on soft, unstable ground, crisscrossed by waterways and prone to natural shifts. Earthquakes struck the region in antiquity, shaking the foundations of temples and collapsing entire districts. Scholars believe a process called liquefaction, where solid ground turns into fluid under seismic pressure, played a key role. Entire blocks of the city simply sank into the waterlogged earth, dragging monuments, homes, and harbors into the sea. Gradually, as the coastline shifted and the sea rose, the ruins were covered in sediment, entombed in mud that paradoxically preserved them from further destruction. What was once a thriving metropolis became an underwater necropolis, its memory fading into legend. What makes the story of Heracleion and Canopus especially compelling is the way it blurs the boundary between myth and reality. Ancient writers described these cities as places of divine power, centers of mystery cults, and hosts to grand festivals. Herodotus wrote of Heracleon's role in religious ceremonies and its immense wealth, while Canopus was remembered for rituals of Osiris and even for its reputation as a place of indulgence and pleasure. For centuries, historians debated whether these accounts were exaggerated or entirely fictional. The rediscovery of the cities proved that the ancient stories, often dismissed as legend, were rooted in truth. The temples were real, the statues were real, the harbors were real, the myths had always been memories of a world that once existed and then disappeared beneath the waves. The sheer beauty of the finds adds to the sense of wonder. Divers swam alongside statues of pharaohs and gods, their faces still serene after more than 1,000 years underwater. Carved inscriptions, perfectly preserved in the silt, revealed decrees of rulers and dedications to deities. Jewelry gleamed as though it had been dropped yesterday. Even everyday items, weights, tools, ceramics, emerged from the mud, reminders that this was not only a city of kings and priests but also of merchants, sailors, and families. Through these artifacts, we glimpse not just the grandeur of Heracleion but the daily life of its people, now suspended in time at the bottom of the sea. Yet, as with all stories of lost cities, there is an unsettling undertone. How many lives were disrupted when the ground gave way beneath them? Were temples full of worshippers when the earth shook, when walls collapsed and the sea surged in? Did merchants watch in horror as their ships and warehouses sank before their eyes? To walk through the ruins today, or to swim, as diverse must, is to imagine those final days, when a city that had stood for centuries collapsed in a matter of moments. The silence of the seabed conceals the terror of that day, leaving only stones and statues to bear witness. The rediscovery of Heracleion in Canopus also forces us to confront how fragile even the greatest civilizations are. Egypt is known for its pyramids and monuments that endure in the desert, yet here were entire cities erased from the landscape, forgotten until the 21st century. Above ground, Egypt represents permanence, endurance, and eternity. Beneath the waves, it reveals impermanence, vulnerability, and loss. The contrast is striking. The pyramids still tower over the sands, while temples of equal grandeur lie hidden underwater, unknown for centuries. It is a reminder that history is not always what survives in plain sight but also what has been buried, waiting for rediscovery. The forbidden history aspect of Heracleion lies not in its existence but in how easily it was dismissed. For centuries, scholars doubted the ancient accounts, treating them as literary inventions. When Gaudio's team revealed the ruins, it was as though the sea itself had vindicated the storytellers of antiquity. Myths, it turned out, could preserve historical truth in ways the modern world had underestimated. The lesson is clear: when we disregard legends, we risk ignoring fragments of memory that can lead us to extraordinary discoveries. The ocean does not erase, it conceals, waiting for those who dare to look. Today, Heracleion and Canopus remain partly excavated, their secrets still hidden beneath layers of silt. Each new dive brings up artifacts that reshape our understanding of Egypt's maritime power and cultural complexity. And yet, even with these discoveries, a sense of mystery lingers. The cities are not fully mapped, their final days not fully explained. Perhaps that is fitting. The sea rarely gives up all its secrets at once. It prefers to tease, to reveal fragments, to remind us that beneath the waves lies a history both real and forbidden, a history that whispers of civilizations as vibrant as any on land, now resting in silence at the bottom of the ocean. Beneath the gray waters of the North Sea lies a lost world that few outside archaeology have heard of, yet it once stretched across hundreds of thousands of square kilometers. Today it is known as Doggerland, a vast plain that once connected Britain to continental Europe, a land of rivers, forests, and lakes that supported thriving communities of hunter-gatherers. To stand on a modern beach along England's eastern coast and look out to sea is to gaze across what was once fertile ground, where families built shelters, herds grazed on meadows, and fish swam in freshwater streams. Only 10,000 years ago, long before the English Channel existed, one could have walked from London to Amsterdam without ever stepping foot on a boat. But then the seas rose, slowly at first, then catastrophically, and Doggerland was erased, its people scattered, its memory reduced to myth until fishermen began dredging up strange bones and artifacts from the seabed centuries later. Doggerland's story begins at the end of the last ice age. For thousands of years, glaciers had locked up much of the planet's water, lowering global sea levels by over 100 meters. What is now the North Sea was then an open expanse of rolling hills and valleys, teeming with life. Archaeologists believe it was a paradise for Mesolithic peoples, rich soils for gathering plants, abundant animals like red deer, aurochs, and wild boar for hunting, and waterways filled with fish. These early communities were not primitive wanderers but skilled foragers who built seasonal camps, fashioned tools from flint and bone, and developed social networks that stretched across Europe. Doggerland was not some marginal outpost but a heartland, a thriving corridor between lands that are now divided by water. The evidence for this drowned world comes not from ancient texts, but from the nets of fishermen and the surveys of oil companies. For centuries, fishermen trawling the North Sea pulled up mammoth bones, reindeer antlers, and even human remains, baffling at how such things could come from the seabed. In the 20th century, seismic surveys conducted for offshore drilling revealed the contours of ancient river systems buried beneath layers of silt. What once were coastlines, lakes, and estuaries showed up in sonar maps like ghostly fingerprints of a vanished land. Divers recovered harpoons carved from antler, axes chipped from stone, and fragments of human skulls, direct testimony that people once thrived where now only waves roll. Piece by piece, Doggerland emerged from the shadows of prehistory as one of the greatest lost landscapes in human memory. But if Doggerland was once so rich, how did it vanish? The answer lies in the relentless power of climate change at the end of the Ice Age. As glaciers melted, sea levels rose steadily, encroaching inch by inch upon the land. Families who once camped along riverbanks would have returned each season to find the waterline creeping closer. Villages were abandoned, hunting grounds lost, sacred places drowned. For generations, people adapted, moving to higher ground, building boats, seeking new territories. But then came the final blow. Around 8,200 years ago, a catastrophic event known as the Storegga slide occurred off the coast of Norway, when a massive undersea landslide triggered a tsunami that surged across the North Atlantic. The waves battered the low-lying plains of Doggerland, flooding what little land remained. Within centuries, almost the entire landscape had disappeared beneath the sea, leaving only Dogger Bank, a shallow sandbar, as a lonely remnant of a once vast territory. The loss of Doggerland would have been nothing short of apocalyptic for the people who lived there. Imagine watching as the ground where your ancestors were buried was swallowed by the sea, as familiar forests turned to bays, as hunting trails vanished into waves. For the Mesolithic communities, the memory of a great flood must have seared itself into oral tradition, passed down through generations until it became legend. Some researchers suggest that stories of great deluges, found in cultures from Mesopotamia to Scandinavia, may have roots in events like the drowning of Doggerland. What was once daily life became myth, and what was once homeland became ocean. Today, Doggerland is a frontier of forbidden history because it challenges our view of the past. For centuries, archaeologists assumed that hunter-gatherers of the Mesolithic lived in small, scattered groups, eking out a meager existence. But Doggerland paints a different picture, a landscape capable of supporting large, interconnected communities with complex social lives. It forces us to reconsider what civilization means and when it truly began. If entire societies could flourish in landscapes now lost to the sea, how many other Doggerlands lie hidden along drowned coastlines across the globe? Every drowned riverbed, every submerged forest might conceal artifacts that could reshape our understanding of human history. Doggerland also resonates with eerie modern relevance. As our own seas rise due to climate change, we are reliving in real time what those ancient people endured. Coastal villages face erosion, islands vanish beneath the Pacific, and families are displaced by floods. The echoes of Doggerland remind us that humanity has lived through such upheavals before, though not without loss. It is both a warning and a lesson. Civilizations, no matter how rooted they seem, are vulnerable to forces far greater than themselves. What happened once in the North Sea can happen again, on coastlines around the world. The physical remnants of Doggerland remain tantalizingly close yet out of reach. Archaeologists continue to study sediment cores, DNA from ancient bones, and sonar scans to piece together what life was like in this drowned world. Each discovery adds texture to the picture, a carving here, a flint blade there, the skull of a woman whose people once walked in forests now buried under waves. And yet, the North Sea guards its secrets jealously, covering most of Doggerland in silt, currents, and darkness. It is a reminder that the past is not always accessible, that vast chapters of our story are hidden just out of sight, waiting for chance or technology to bring them back to light. To imagine Doggerland in its prime is to conjure a vivid picture, hunters tracking red deer across open plains, families gathered around hearths in skin-covered shelters, children playing by rivers that no longer exist. The air would have carried the sound of birdsong, the rustle of wind in forests, the rush of streams flowing toward the sea. It was a world as real and vibrant as our own, yet one that ended not with conquest or fire but with water, slow and unstoppable. Today, the North Sea covers it in silence, the waves hiding a forgotten landscape that was once home to tens of thousands. Doggerland is not simply a lost land, it is a symbol of the fragility of memory and the relentlessness of change. It reminds us that what we take for permanent, coastlines, nations, even continents, can shift and vanish. It teaches us that myths of floods may be echoes of real catastrophes, and that our own future may mirror the past if we fail to heed its lessons. And above all, it whispers from beneath the waves that civilizations, no matter how ordinary or extraordinary, leave traces that wait to be rediscovered, telling stories we thought were lost forever. Just off the Bay of Naples, where the Mediterranean sun glitters on the surface of the water, lies a city that was once the playground of Rome's most powerful men and women. Its name was Baiae, a resort so notorious for excess that later writers called it the Las Vegas of the ancient world. Here, emperors built opulent villas along the shoreline, marble bathhouses steamed with mineral-rich water, and decadent feasts stretched long into the night. Baiae was a place where fortunes were squandered, where political plots were whispered over goblets of wine, and where desire and luxury reigned unchecked. Yet today, those same villas, mosaics, and bathhouses rest beneath the sea, preserved in an eerie underwater museum that reminds us of both Rome's grandeur and its downfall. Baiae rose to prominence in the late Republic and flourished through the height of the empire. Located on the Phlegrean Peninsula, it sat atop a volcanic region riddled with hot springs and fumaroles. To the Romans, these steaming waters were not only a luxury but a promise of health and rejuvenation. The rich and powerful flocked to Baiae, building sprawling estates that overlooked the bay, each competing to be more magnificent than the last. Julius Caesar visited, Augustus kept a residence, Nero indulged in its pleasures, and Hadrian died within its walls. To vacation in Baiae was to announce that you had arrived at the pinnacle of Roman society, where wealth, influence, and sensual indulgence intertwined. The city's reputation, however, extended beyond luxury into the realm of scandal. Roman poets and historians described Baiae as a place of corruption and decadence, where morality dissolved in the steam of the baths and the intoxication of endless banquets. Seneca wrote bitterly of its excess, while Propertius warned of its temptations. It was here that the boundaries between political power and personal pleasure blurred, where alliances were cemented in private chambers and rivals were undone over whispered conspiracies. The very allure of Baiae became its infamy, a place where the empire's elite indulged in pleasures the common people could only imagine, leaving behind tales of intrigue, passion, and betrayal that clung to the city's name long after it sank. What sets Baiae apart from other lost cities is the way it disappeared. Unlike Pompeii and Herculaneum, destroyed in a single volcanic cataclysm, Baiae succumbed slowly to the shifting earth beneath it. The region is part of the Campi Flegrei, or burning fields, a vast volcanic caldera that continues to simmer with seismic activity. Over centuries, a process known as bradysism, the gradual rising and falling of the earth due to underground magma movements, caused the ground at Baiae to sink. Villas that once stood proudly on the shore slipped beneath the water, their courtyards and frescoes submerged, their mosaics now home to fish and sea grass. By the Middle Ages, much of the city was gone, its once glittering reputation reduced to stories and ruins. What was once Rome's most decadent resort became a ghost beneath the waves. The rediscovery of Baiae's ruins revealed treasures that brought the city back to life. Divers found mosaics as vivid as the day they were laid, depicting gods, geometric patterns, and mythological scenes. Marble columns rose from the seabed, toppled statues lay half-buried in silt, and entire rooms could be traced, their walls still decorated with fragments of paint. Walking, or rather swimming, through the remains, one encounters banquet halls, private bathhouses, and sprawling gardens, all preserved by the sea in an underwater tableau of Roman luxury. Unlike Pompeii, which captured everyday life frozen in disaster, Baiae captured the heights of indulgence, its ruins telling the story of a society unashamed of its appetites. The life of Baiae also carried a darker side, one that mirrored the dangers of unchecked power. Stories tell of Nero plotting his mother's murder in its waters, of emperors succumbing to paranoia and debauchery, of villas becoming prisons as much as palaces. To enjoy Baiae was to court both pleasure and peril. Its baths were said to heal, but its reputation suggested moral decay. For later generations, Baiae became a cautionary tale, a symbol of Rome's decadence in its twilight years. To see its ruins today, lying silent beneath the waves, is to be reminded not only of natural forces but of the impermanence of wealth, power, and pleasure. Swimming above the ruins, one can imagine the city in its prime, steam rising from hot pools where senators and generals discussed matters of state while reclining in luxury, gardens filled with exotic plants brought from across the empire, marble terraces lit by oil lamps as music and laughter spilled into the night. Ships once anchored offshore, bringing delicacies from the far corners of the empire to satisfy the endless appetite of its elite. And beneath all this splendor ran the undercurrent of politics, where alliances were struck, betrayals were planned, and the fate of Rome was shaped as much in the baths of Baiae as in the Senate of the capital. The irony of Baiae's fate is that its reputation for excess and corruption may have helped erase it from collective memory. Unlike Rome itself, preserved in history as a symbol of order and empire, Baiae was remembered in moralistic terms, a warning of decadence leading to downfall. For centuries, the city was dismissed as a den of sin, its physical disappearance almost poetic justice in the eyes of moralists. Only in recent decades, with systematic underwater excavations, has Baiae re-emerged as more than a cautionary tale, as a vibrant, tangible city whose walls still whisper the laughter and schemes of those who once lived there. Baiae's story captures the essence of forbidden history. It reminds us that what is condemned by later generations can still hold truth, beauty, and lessons. Its ruins do not simply tell of indulgence, they reveal the daily lives of Romans at their most opulent, showing us a side of the empire often ignored in favor of battles and emperors. And they reveal once more the relentless power of the earth and sea, forces that care nothing for human ambition. The emperors who built their palaces here believed they were eternal, yet today their marble halls lie beneath the waves, their luxury preserved only as shadows beneath the surface. Baiae lingers as both spectacle and warning. It shows us that civilizations can reach heights of indulgence as easily as they reach heights of achievement, and that the sea remembers both with equal clarity. To swim through its underwater streets is to see the paradox of Rome itself, powerful and fragile, glorious and corrupt, eternal and doomed. The city that once glittered as the jewel of the empire is now a silent ruin, a reminder that no empire, no matter how mighty, escapes the pull of time, the tremors of the earth, and the judgment of the sea. The Caribbean Sea is a place of turquoise waters and sunlit beaches, but beneath its calm surface lie mysteries that have puzzled explorers and scientists alike. For decades, rumors have circulated of ruins lying deep below the waves, stone blocks arranged in geometric patterns, stair-like formations, and grid-like layouts that resemble streets and plazas. These whispers speak of civilizations long forgotten, swallowed by the sea long before Columbus sailed across the Atlantic, perhaps even before the pyramids rose in Egypt. Among the most tantalizing of these stories is that of the submerged structures off the coast of Cuba, where sonar scans in the early 2000s revealed something extraordinary, vast shapes at depths far too great for ordinary human construction, shapes that some interpreted as the remains of a lost city. The discovery came when a Canadian research team, using sonar equipment to map the seabed for oil exploration, stumbled across what appeared to be massive stone structures nearly 600 meters below the surface of the Yucatan Channel. The sonar images revealed rectangular blocks, pyramidal shapes, and straight lines that seemed to form organized layouts, features that immediately ignited speculation. If these were truly artificial, they would represent a civilization older than anything currently known in the Americas, a culture capable of monumental architecture thousands of years before the Maya or Olmec. Yet the depth posed a staggering problem. sea levels have not been that low in the Caribbean for more than 10,000 years, placing such a city at the edge of the Ice Age, when mainstream history insists the region was home only to small bands of hunter-gatherers. News of the discovery spread quickly, capturing imaginations around the world. Headlines proclaimed the Cuban Atlantis, and theories flourished. Some suggested a lost chapter of pre-Columbian history, a civilization wiped out by rising seas at the end of the last ice age. Others connected the find to Atlantis itself, pointing out that Plato's description placed the lost city beyond the Pillars of Hercules, in the Atlantic Ocean. The Caribbean, with its islands and shallow shelves, seemed to fit the bill. To those who already believed in advanced prehistoric societies, the sonar images were confirmation that history was far older and more complex than textbooks claimed. But almost as quickly as the discovery was announced, skepticism followed. Many scientists cautioned that sonar images are often misleading, capable of creating false impressions of order and geometry where none exist. At depths of 600 meters, it would have been impossible for humans to build or inhabit the structures without technologies we do not associate with ancient peoples. Mainstream archaeologists dismissed the claims as misinterpretations of natural rock formations shaped by tectonic activity. Funding for follow-up exploration dried up, and official reports became scarce. To believers, the sudden silence felt suspicious, as though evidence had been deliberately downplayed or ignored to prevent disruption of accepted historical narratives. To skeptics, it was simply the natural course of science discarding extraordinary claims unsupported by solid evidence. Yet the Caribbean holds more than just the Cuban anomaly. Throughout the region, divers and fishermen have reported curious underwater formations. Off the coast of the Bahamas lies the so-called Bimini Road, a series of massive stone blocks forming a straight, linear path. Some argue it is a natural beach rock formation shaped by waves and currents, but others insist it is the remains of an ancient roadway or breakwater, crafted by a civilization lost to the sea. The structure lies at a depth consistent with sea levels around 10,000 years ago, further fueling speculation that it represents a forgotten chapter of human history. Photographs of the site show neatly aligned blocks stretching into the distance, an image that feeds the imagination of those searching for Atlantis in the Caribbean. Theories about lost civilizations in this part of the world are often connected to ancient maps and oral traditions. Renaissance cartographers produced charts that seem to show islands in the mid-Atlantic that do not exist today, leading some to believe they recorded fragments of lands that later sank. Indigenous stories from Central America speak of floods that destroyed earlier peoples, myths that parallel tales from distant cultures across the globe. To those who believe in a global memory of catastrophic floods, the Caribbean's anomalies are not coincidences but evidence of a shared trauma from the end of the Ice Age, when seas rose hundreds of feet and swallowed coastal settlements everywhere. What makes the Caribbean submerged structures so fascinating is not only the question of whether they are natural or artificial, but what they represent for the narrative of history. If real, they suggest that human beings achieved monumental architecture far earlier than currently accepted, perhaps even before agriculture was fully developed. They would challenge the idea that complex societies only emerged around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago in places like Mesopotamia and Egypt. Instead, they would point to the possibility of advanced cultures during the Ice Age, cultures capable of building cities that have since been drowned by rising seas. That possibility, however remote, terrifies mainstream academia because it undermines the linear progression of history on which so much is built. For divers who visit sites like Bimini, the experience is less about scholarly debate and more about visceral wonder. To swim over blocks the size of cars, laid end to end in the clear blue water, is to feel the pull of mystery. Whether natural or man-made, the formations invite questions, compel the imagination, and connect the present with a sense of lost worlds. In Cuba, the lack of access to the sonar site leaves it shrouded in secrecy, a forbidden place that continues to inspire speculation. In a sense, the very absence of definitive proof has become part of the allure. The Caribbean's mysteries remain unresolved, suspended between evidence and doubt, myth and science. The story of the Caribbean's lost structures fits perfectly into the broader pattern of forbidden history. It demonstrates how easily discoveries can be overshadowed, how quickly anomalies are dismissed when they do not align with established timelines. At the same time, it shows how myths persist because they resonate with deeper truths, that the sea has swallowed more than we know, and that civilizations may have risen and fallen long before the pages of history began to be written. Whether the sonar images of Cuba reveal a true city or an illusion, whether the Bimini Road is a monument or a quirk of geology, the Caribbean keeps its secrets close, inviting only the brave and the curious to wonder what lies beneath its depths. What remains certain is that the Caribbean, like the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, and the North Sea, bears witness to the ocean's power to erase human achievement. Cities and settlements, if they existed, are now hidden beneath coral and sand, their stories whispered only in the currents. The water conceals both truth and myth, and until exploration resumes in earnest, the line between the two will remain blurred. Yet perhaps that is the greatest power of these forbidden histories, not in providing answers, but in reminding us how much we do not know, and how much remains waiting to be rediscovered beneath the waves. When we think of climate change today, we imagine melting ice sheets, rising seas, and the fear of coastal cities drowning in the future. Yet this is not a new story. Thousands of years ago, long before the modern age, the Earth's shifting climate reshaped coastlines, swallowed lands, and forced entire populations to abandon their homes. The ancient world was not static, frozen in timeless ruins, but dynamic, fragile, and deeply vulnerable to the forces of nature. The lost cities beneath the sea are not merely isolated tragedies, they are chapters in a global saga of climate change, a reminder that the planet has always been in motion and that human civilizations have always stood on shifting ground. At the end of the last ice age, roughly 12,000 years ago, massive glaciers that had locked away much of the world's water began to melt. As temperatures rose, seas crept higher, slowly at first, then with dramatic surges. Coastlines retreated by hundreds of kilometers. Islands disappeared. Whole regions that had once been dry and fertile turned into seafloors. For the people of that time, the changes were nothing less than catastrophic. Imagine returning to a familiar hunting ground, only to find it submerged. Imagine building a settlement near a river, only to watch the river valley become a bay. These experiences were seared into human memory, and over time, they became the foundation for myths and legends of great floods that appear in cultures around the world. One of the most striking examples of climate-driven upheaval is the Black Sea flood hypothesis. According to some scientists, around 7,600 years ago, rising Mediterranean waters burst through the Bosporus Strait, flooding the basin of the Black Sea. Before this event, the Black Sea was a freshwater lake surrounded by thriving Neolithic communities. When the saltwater rushed in, it may have raised the water level by more than 100 meters, drowning villages, farmlands, and sacred places in a geological instant. If true, this event would have displaced tens of thousands of people, forcing migrations that shaped the spread of agriculture and culture across Europe and Asia. Some researchers even connect the story to biblical flood myths, suggesting that the memory of such a disaster endured in oral tradition long enough to become scripture. Similar cataclysms played out across the globe. In Southeast Asia, the Sunda Shelf, once a vast landmass connecting Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, was swallowed by rising seas, leaving behind only the scattered islands we know today. For the people who lived there, the transformation must have seemed apocalyptic, a sprawling homeland reduced to archipelagos, their societies scattered, their memories fractured. In the Americas, evidence suggests that coastal settlements along both the Atlantic and Pacific were submerged as glaciers melted and oceans rose. Entire lifeways were erased, leaving little behind but artifacts dredged from the sea. Each of these events tells the same story: the sea rises, and human beings must adapt or vanish. But climate change in the ancient world was not only about rising seas. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis added sudden violence to the slow march of geological time. In the Mediterranean, tectonic instability caused cities like Pavlopetri, Heracleion, and Baiae to sink. Earthquakes liquefied soil, dragging temples and villas into the depths. Tsunamis, triggered by undersea landslides or volcanic explosions, swept entire coastlines clean in a matter of hours. The Thera eruption around 1600 BCE devastated the island of Santorini and may have destabilized civilizations across the Aegean. Such events became woven into mythology, gods punishing mortals, seas swallowing the arrogant, floods cleansing the earth of corruption. Beneath the poetry lay the raw truth of natural disaster, reframed by ancient minds as divine will. The human experience of these changes was not abstract but deeply personal. For every submerged city, there were families who lost homes, fields, and ancestors' graves. To them, the sea was not simply beautiful but terrifying, a force that gave life through trade and fish yet threatened to erase everything without warning. Archaeological evidence of hurried abandonments, scattered tools, and drowned settlements testifies to lives interrupted, communities broken. The myths of floods may carry echoes of real grief, stories told around fires of the day the water came, the day the gods turned against them, the day the world they knew ended forever. And yet, as devastating as these events were, they also shaped the course of human history. The migrations triggered by rising seas spread cultures and technologies across continents. Communities displaced from Doggerland, the Black Sea, or the Sunda Shelf carried their knowledge with them, planting seeds of agriculture, language, and myth in new lands. In this way, climate change acted as both destroyer and creator, breaking apart civilizations while also forging new ones. The very fragility of ancient societies made them adaptive, capable of survival even in the face of overwhelming loss. For us today, the stories of ancient climate disasters carry an unsettling resonance. We stand once again at the edge of rising seas, watching as coastlines retreat, as storms intensify, as islands face disappearance. The drowned ruins of the past are not only archaeological curiosities but warnings written in stone beneath the waves. They tell us that human civilization, no matter how advanced, is never immune to the forces of nature. Just as Heracleion vanished beneath earthquakes and floods, just as Doggerland sank beneath the North Sea, our own cities, New York, Miami, Jakarta, Venice, could one day lie underwater, remembered only in fragments and myths. The forbidden history of climate change is that it is not new, not unique to our age. Ancient people lived through it, and their memories linger in myths of deluges and punishments. What is forbidden is the acknowledgement that our modern world, despite its technology and ambition, may not be so different from theirs. The ocean does not care for empires or progress. It rises and falls with its own rhythm, indifferent to human ambition. We like to believe our history is permanent, but the drowned ruins beneath the waves remind us that permanence is an illusion. To walk along the seafloor among the ruins of Pavlopetri or Heracleion, or to hold a flint blade dredged from the North Sea, is to feel this truth viscerally. These are not relics of failed peoples but of ordinary men and women who built, loved, thrived, and then watched helplessly as the sea reclaimed their world. Their story is our story, separated only by time. The climate changed then, as it does now. The seas rose then, as they rise now. The question is not whether the ocean will change, but whether we will learn from the echoes of those who came before, or whether we too will become myths, remembered only as a civilization swallowed by the waves. Every lost city beneath the sea tells a story of nature's power, but there is another story hidden beneath the surface, the story of how history itself is shaped, guarded, and sometimes suppressed. This is the forbidden history of lost cities, not only the ruins themselves, but the way their discovery is handled, the debates that erupt around them, and the political, cultural, and academic forces that decide what is accepted as fact and what is dismissed as fantasy. It is not enough that the ocean buries civilizations, often, human institutions bury them too, through neglect, ridicule, or deliberate suppression. To understand the mystery of submerged cities, we must also understand the struggles that swirl around their interpretation. The term forbidden history resonates because so many discoveries seem to challenge the official timelines we are taught. Mainstream archaeology presents a clear, linear story. Civilization emerges in Mesopotamia and Egypt around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, then spreads outward in an orderly progression. Advanced societies, monumental architecture, and organized religion are supposed to belong only to this relatively recent period. Yet when divers find submerged ruins that appear older, or when myths like Atlantis or Dwarka are linked to real archaeology, the discoveries often provoke resistance. To acknowledge them would mean revising the story, admitting that humans may have built cities and cultures long before our textbooks allow. Such a shift threatens established authority, reputations, and entire academic frameworks. The case of Atlantis is perhaps the most famous example. Ever since Plato first told the story, seekers have searched for evidence, only to be dismissed by mainstream scholars. Explorers like Ignatius Donnelly in the 19th century or Charles Hapgood in the 20th brought forward bold theories about ancient advanced civilizations, but their work was ridiculed, labeled pseudo-archaeology. Even today, those who study anomalies like the Yonaguni monument or the Cuban sonar structures are often marginalized, their funding cut, their careers jeopardized. To question the conventional timeline is to risk being cast out of the academic community. For some, this is proof that there is something to hide. For others, it is simply the price of protecting science from unfounded speculation. But whichever interpretation one prefers, the result is the same: ideas that might expand our understanding are buried, much like the ruins themselves. The suppression is not always intentional. Sometimes it arises from the structures of academia itself. Universities and research institutions rely on funding, often from governments or private organizations with vested interests. Controversial projects, especially those tied to myths or challenging existing theories, are less likely to receive support. Safer, more predictable studies are prioritized. As a result, sites that could transform our understanding of history are left unexplored, while anomalies that do not fit are quietly ignored. This does not necessarily mean a conspiracy, but it does mean that curiosity alone is not enough to guide exploration. Politics, pride, and economics all play their role in deciding what parts of the past we choose to acknowledge. Nationalism also shapes the way discoveries are interpreted. In India, the underwater ruins near Dwarka ignite fierce debates, not only about archaeology but about cultural identity. To some, the city's existence validates ancient texts and national pride, proving that India's civilization is older and greater than Western scholars admit. To others, the emphasis on myth threatens to undermine scientific credibility, turning archaeology into a tool of politics. In Japan, Yonaguni provokes similar conflicts. Is it a natural formation, or is it evidence of a lost prehistoric culture that predates the Jaman people? To accept the latter would mean rewriting Japan's history, and so the site remains caught between fringe enthusiasm and cautious dismissal. The politics of recognition becomes as important as the ruins themselves. Religion, too, plays a role in shaping what is accepted. Many flood myths around the world, from the story of Noah in the Bible to the tales of Manu in Hinduism, may encode memories of real, ancient disasters. Yet acknowledging this possibility forces uncomfortable questions about how literal or allegorical these texts should be. Some believers see archaeological discoveries like Dwarka as proof of scripture, while skeptics resist such connections for fear of blurring the line between faith and science. The result is a tug-of-war over meaning, where ruins are not only studied for their material remains but fought over for the narratives they support or undermine. Every submerged temple or drowned city becomes a battlefield of interpretation. There is also the issue of cultural ownership. When artifacts are pulled from the seabed, who has the right to claim them? Is it the modern nation nearest the ruins, the descendants of the people who once lived there, or the international community as custodians of human history? These questions complicate exploration and sometimes halt it altogether. In some cases, governments prefer to leave ruins untouched, fearing looting, exploitation, or loss of control over their heritage. In others, they promote discovery selectively, highlighting what fits national narratives and downplaying what does not. Forbidden history is not just about what is hidden in the sea, but about what is hidden from the public once it is found. Yet, in spite of these barriers, the ruins continue to emerge. Divers stumble upon walls, statues, and streets. Fishermen pull up ancient tools in their nets. Technology reveals submerged landscapes once thought impossible. And each time, the same cycle plays out: excitement, speculation, skepticism, and dismissal. The truth becomes a moving target, always elusive, always contested. Perhaps this is why the stories of forbidden history grip us so tightly. They are not just about the past, they are about power in the present. They reveal how fragile our understanding of history really is, how easily it is shaped by authority, pride, and fear. But there is another way to see it. The resistance, the suppression, the debates, they all point to the disruptive power of these discoveries. If submerged cities were trivial, they would not provoke such strong reactions. The fact that they are so contested shows that they matter, that they touch on something deeper than ruins and stones. They challenge our sense of identity, our place in time, our confidence that we know the path humanity has taken. They remind us that history is not fixed but fluid, as mutable as the seas that swallowed these cities. To study them is to confront the possibility that we are only scratching the surface of what once existed. The forbidden history of lost cities is therefore not only about what lies beneath the waves but about what lies between us, the tension between belief and skepticism, between myth and evidence, between the desire for certainty and the reality of mystery. The ocean keeps its secrets well, but sometimes it is human beings who are most determined to keep them hidden. Whether through ridicule, neglect, or politics, we bury truths as effectively as the sea does. And yet, despite it all, the ruins remain. They wait, patient and enduring, beneath the tides of both water and history, whispering to those who dare to listen that the story of humanity is far older, stranger, and more fragile than we are willing to admit. When we speak of lost cities, it is easy to focus on temples, monuments, and myths of grandeur. But beneath the waves, preserved in the ruins, lies something even more haunting: the remnants of ordinary lives. Every street, every jar, every collapsed wall once belonged to people who laughed, cooked meals, raised children, and worried about the same daily struggles that we do. To imagine their cities is not only to marvel at their architecture but to resurrect their humanity. The underwater ruins remind us that history is not just about kings and priests, but about families who lived and died in places now claimed by the sea. In Pavlopetri, the world's oldest submerged city, archaeologists have found the faint traces of domestic life: clay jars used for storing grain, narrow courtyards where families may have gathered, and streets worn by the footsteps of countless generations. These were not monuments to gods but homes. One can almost hear the crackle of hearth fires, the chatter of children, the rhythm of trade as goods passed from house to house. The sea preserved the city's plan so clearly that divers can map out neighborhoods, imagining how daily life unfolded in a Bronze Age settlement more than 5,000 years ago. Here, the drama was not just about survival, but about living, raising crops, tending herds, cooking meals flavored with olive oil and herbs, weaving cloth for clothing, and celebrating festivals in the open square. In Dwarka, off the coast of India, the artifacts tell of both faith and survival. Stone anchors suggest a bustling seafaring community, where ships laden with spices, beads, and offerings departed for distant lands. The myths speak of Lord Krishna ruling a glittering city, but the ruins whisper something more human: fishermen casting their nets, traders counting their wares, priests preparing rituals at dawn. The beads and pottery fragments recovered from the seabed are not relics of divine palaces but of ordinary hands at work. They remind us that beneath the grandeur of myth lies the simple reality of families whose lives revolved around the sea, depending on it for food and trade, yet forever vulnerable to its storms and tides. The lost Egyptian cities of Heracleion and Canopus bring the human story into sharper relief. Alongside colossal statues and temples, archaeologists have recovered jewelry, household tools, and even the remnants of food offerings. These artifacts speak not of rulers alone, but of merchants who bargained in crowded harbors, sailors who repaired nets on the docks, and women who wore pendants as they walked through bustling markets. The presence of Greek coins in Egyptian waters tells of exchanges between cultures, of conversations in many tongues, of lives intertwined through commerce and faith. These were not abstract civilizations but real people navigating daily routines in a multicultural port city. Routines abruptly ended when the ground beneath them gave way. In Baiae, Rome's decadent resort town, the ruins show not only luxury but intimacy. Mosaic floors depict mythological scenes, but they also lay beneath dining rooms where food and laughter filled the air. Frescoes painted on villa walls reveal not just artistic grandeur but the tastes and aspirations of their owners, who wished to surround themselves with beauty. Bathhouses were not simply architectural marvels but places where people relaxed, gossiped, and shared moments of both vulnerability and indulgence. To walk through Baiae's submerged ruins today is to realize that behind the scandals and legends of emperors and elites were servants preparing meals, artisans carving marble, musicians playing for guests, and lovers stealing moments in hidden gardens. The city was alive with ordinary humanity, as vibrant as any resort town today. Even in Doggerland, a land with no surviving monuments, the fragments tell us of daily life. Flint tools shaped for hunting, harpoons crafted from antler, and bones of animals roasted over open fires reveal a world of ingenuity and resilience. Families lived in shelters made of wood and hide, moving with the seasons, following herds, and fishing in rivers that no longer exist. The skull fragments dredged from the North Sea are not just archaeological data, they are the remains of people who lived full lives in a landscape now lost. Their world may not have had temples or cities of stone, but it was no less real, no less filled with laughter, grief, and hope. What all these ruins reveal is the fragility of ordinary life. For the people who lived in these cities, the sea was not an enemy but a companion. It gave them food, connected them to distant lands, and shaped their culture. Yet it also held the power to erase them completely. When the floods came, when the ground shook, when the waves surged higher each year, the lives they had built, homes, markets, temples, memories, vanished beneath the water. For those who survived, the loss must have been profound. Imagine standing on a shoreline, watching the water creep into your fields, knowing that the graves of your ancestors and the home you built for your children will soon disappear. For them, the sea was not simply nature's power, but a thief of memory. The emotional weight of these ruins lingers. Divers often describe a sense of unease, even reverence, when swimming through submerged cities. To see a mosaic floor still gleaming beneath shifting sand, or to touch a wall built by hands thousands of years ago, is to feel the presence of lives interrupted. These are not just stones, they are echoes of humanity. The silence of the sea, the way fish glide through what were once living rooms and temples, heightens the sense of ghostly survival. It is as if the cities are still inhabited, not by people but by memory itself, preserved in salt and silt. This perspective transforms the story of lost cities. It is not only about grand civilizations destroyed by nature's fury, but about ordinary human beings caught in the tide of history. It reminds us that our own lives, so busy and full of routines, may one day be reduced to fragments of pottery, scattered foundations, or a mosaic glimpsed by future archaeologists. The people of Pavlopetri, Dwarka, Heracleion, Baiae, and Doggerland never imagined their homes would lie beneath the sea, their lives studied as mysteries. Yet here we are, peering into their world, realizing that their fate is not alien but entirely human. To see these ruins is to confront our own fragility. The ocean erases palaces and huts alike. It does not distinguish between emperors and fishermen, between gods worshipped and meals prepared. It swallows everything with equal indifference, leaving only traces for the future to find. And yet, in those traces, something profound survives, the unbroken thread of human life, the persistence of memory, the stubborn desire to leave a mark even when the sea rises to reclaim it. The everyday lives of the drowned cities remind us that history is not just about power and glory, but about the universal struggle to live, to endure, and to be remembered.